My name is Evelyn Hart. I turned 70 last spring, though most mornings I still wake up expecting to find my husband's slippers by the bed. Portland has been home all my life, wet streets, gray skies, and the kind of November rain that makes you bake just to feel warm. Every Thanksgiving, I pull out the same recipe card my mother gave me in 1968. Its edges yellowed and soft, and make her pumpkin pie. That afternoon, the house smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg. The crust cooled beside the window, and I stood there thinking about how quiet the place had become since Walter passed. My daughter, Lydia, usually called by now, asking what to bring, complaining about traffic, laughing too loudly. When the phone stayed silent, I decided to be the one to reach out. She picked up after a few rings, her voice half covered by the hum of conversation in the background. "Hey, Mom," she said between bursts of laughter. I could hear plates clinking, someone turning up music. "I just wanted to ask what I should bring for dinner," I said. "Pie's ready. And I can make the rolls," if Lydia cut me off with a giggle that wasn't cruel. Not exactly just careless. "Oh, Mom," she said, the sound of her husband's voice somewhere behind her, low and amused. "Thanksgiving's for real family only this year." The words landed softly, like snow on glass, but they stayed there, cold and heavy. I didn't answer right away. I watched a drop of filling slide down the edge of the pie dish, dark orange against porcelain. "I see," I finally said, keeping my tone even. "Well, I hope your family has a lovely dinner." She said something else. I think something about calling next week, but I had already hung up. My hand shook once, then went still. That evening, I set a single plate on the table. The pie tasted fine, though I couldn't finish it. Later, when I reached for my old checkbook, the same one that had covered her rent, her car payments, her credit cards, I opened to a blank page. For the first time in years, I didn't write a check. I closed the book, folded my hands, and listened to the steady rain against the window. Tomorrow, I would start making different lists. After Walter passed, I told myself I would keep things simple, sell the truck, pay off the last of the house repairs, and live quietly. But Lydia called the week after the funeral, voice trembling, saying her hours had been cut at the salon and she didn't know how she'd cover rent. "It's just until I get back on my feet, Mom," she said. I remember writing that first check while the casserole dishes from the neighbors still crowded my counter. It felt like doing something useful when everything else had stopped making sense. One check became 2, then 3. Before long, Lydia's name was on my phone bill, my car insurance, even my grocery account. When her car broke down, I paid the repair shop directly. When she said her electricity had been shut off, I transferred enough to cover the balance. Every time she promised to pay me back, her voice sounded so much like mine used to when I was young and desperate for approval. "Next month, Mom, I swear." Sometimes, when the mail piled up, I'd see 2 envelopes side by side, her overdue notice and my property tax reminder, and I'd pay hers first. "That became my rhythm," she asked. I answered. Marjorie noticed before I did. My sister had a way of cutting through excuses like fog. One afternoon, over tea, she looked at me and said, "You're not helping her stand, Evie. You're keeping her leaning." I laughed it off then. She's had a rough few years, marriage falling apart, that layoff, the hospital bills. "Everyone has a rough few years," Marjorie interrupted softly. "But you can't spend your peace buying hers." I changed the subject, pretending not to hear. Still, that night, I lay awake replaying her words. When Lydia called again a month later, crying over a late payment on her car, I said yes before she even finished the sentence. Habit moves faster than thought. I told myself I was being kind, responsible, the good mother who never lets her child fall. But each yes felt heavier, as if I were stacking bricks on my own chest. building something I couldn't yet name, something that looked an awful lot like a cage. Thanksgiving morning came without sound. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon from the pie I had baked 2 days earlier, but the air felt still, like the world had decided to hold its breath. I set one plate at the table, out of habit white china, folded napkin, silver fork, and then stood there wondering who I thought it was for. I turned on the radio for company, but the music felt wrong. Too cheerful, too busy, so I switched it off and poured myself coffee instead. Outside, the rain came steady, brushing against the windows like it was trying to be let in. By noon, I had given up pretending to cook. I sat with my phone and scrolled through the noise of other people's lives. Lydia's page appeared first. A long table, golden light, her husband carving a turkey. The caption read, "Family means everything." I stared until my eyes blurred. Not one mention, not even a plate with my old serving bowl, though I could see it there, my grandmother's blue ceramic dish filled with mashed potatoes. My hands went cold around the phone. I wasn't forgotten. I was erased. I put the phone down and reached for my notepad from the kitchen drawer. On a clean page, I wrote at the top, what I pay for Lydia. The list grew quickly: rent, car insurance, phone, health premiums, streaming accounts, grocery cards, fuel. The numbers startled me. Added together, it was nearly the value of Walter's workshop, the place he'd built with his hands 40 years ago. For a moment, I could almost see him there again, wiping sawdust from his palms, saying in that quiet way of his, "You can't build something solid on guilt, Evie." I capped the pen and sat back, the page open in front of me. The sound of rain filled the room. Somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's laughter rose and faded. I folded the list once, then twice, and slipped it inside my checkbook. This ends tonight. The next morning, I made coffee stronger than usual and cleared the kitchen table. Bills, envelopes, bank statements, years of quiet obedience laid out in front of me. Each page carried her name somewhere, like a watermark I had never noticed before. Lydia's rent, Lydia's phone, Lydia's everything. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank. The woman who answered sounded young, her voice smooth but cautious. "Thank you for calling Greenhaven Credit Union. How can I help you today?" "I need to remove my name from a joint account," I said. "Effective immediately." There was a pause. "Of course, Mrs. Hart." "May I ask the reason for the change? Because the other person no longer needs my help," I replied. She hesitated, polite confusion in her silence. "Are you sure, ma'am? Once we separate your accounts, you'll lose access to transfers and shared statements." I looked at the neat pile of envelopes beside me, the weight of years written in numbers. "Yes," I said, completely sure. Her keyboard clicked softly, a sound like rain. "All right, Mrs. Hart, that's done. You'll receive a confirmation letter within 5 business days." When I hung up, the house was still. I moved to the computer and logged into the remaining accounts' utilities. Credit cards, auto payments. Each cancel button felt like cutting another thread I hadn't realized was strangling me. By noon, the list I had made on Thanksgiving was half crossed out. My hand trembled only once. When I deleted her phone line from my plan, I remembered the first call I'd made to her number the day she moved into her first apartment. She'd said, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll handle it all soon." Soon had lasted 15 years. I opened my folder of legal papers and took out the will Walter and I had written decades ago. The ink had faded, but his signature looked steady, as if he had known I'd need its courage one day. I added a note for my lawyer. Reallocate Lydia's inheritance into a community literacy scholarship, the Walter Hart Reading Fund. When I finished, I closed the checkbook. The air in the room shifted lighter, like the house had finally exhaled. I poured another cup of coffee and sat by the window, listening to the steady rhythm of rain. For once, it sounded less like sorrow and more like peace. The first text came 2 mornings later. Rent's due. Can you check if the transfer went through? I read it while the kettle whistled and set the phone back down without answering. A few hours later, another message arrived. Mom, did the bank mess up? This time I replied with 2 words. No mistake. The typing dots blinked for a long while before disappearing. By evening, 3 new messages filled the screen. You always said you'd be there for me. Then, this isn't fair. Then, finally. Wow, guess I know where I stand. I didn't respond. I turned off the phone and spent the rest of the night reading. The quiet felt strange at first, like waiting for thunder that never came. But it was a welcome kind of strange. By the next morning, there were 7 missed calls and a string of messages stacked one after another. I'm late on the car payment. The kids need shoes. You're seriously going to let me drown. You're selfish. You abandoned me. I deleted the entire thread without reading the rest. When Marjorie stopped by that afternoon, I was sitting by the kitchen window, folding old receipts into neat piles. She stood in the doorway, studying me with that sharp look only sisters have. You're quiet today, she said. I'm trying something new. I told her, it's called peace. She laughed softly. You look lighter. I finally stopped sponsoring my own pain, I said. Marjorie leaned against the counter. Has she called? I nodded. More times than I can count. I'm not answering yet. Yet she asked. Silence has its own timing, I said. It teaches better than speeches. Marjorie reached for my hand. You're stronger than I thought, Evie. I squeezed her fingers once, then released them. No, I said quietly. I'm just finally tired of being useful. When she left, I turned my phone face down and let it stay that way. The house hummed softly around me, the kind of stillness that used to frighten me. Now, it felt like the first honest conversation I had ever had with myself. The knock came just after sunset sharp, hurried, desperate. I knew that rhythm long before I reached the door. When I opened it, Lydia stood there in the rain, her coat plastered to her arms, mascara running in thin black lines. You can't do this to me, Mom, she said, her voice trembling between anger and panic. You can't just cut me off like some stranger. Come inside, I said quietly. You're soaked. She hesitated, then stepped in, dripping onto the rug. I took her coat, hung it on the back of the chair, and filled the kettle. The silence between us felt heavier than the sound of the rain outside. I don't need tea, she snapped. I need money. The rent's overdue, and Caleb's hours got cut again. I'm already behind on the car. I poured the water anyway, letting the steam rise between us. I'm not doing anything to you, Lydia. I said, I'm just done doing for you. Her mouth fell open. So that's it. You're just walking away after everything I've been through. I've been through it too, I said softly. Every time you called crying, every late notice, every promise. I went through it all right alongside you. She slammed her hand on the table. You're heartless. No, I said, setting the cup in front of her. I'm warm for the first time in years. The words seemed to knock the air out of her. For a second, she just stared at me, eyes shining not with gratitude, but disbelief. I don't understand you anymore, she whispered. I know, I said. That's what growing apart feels like. She stood suddenly, snatching her coat from the chair. Fine, I'll figure it out myself. I hope you do, I said, and meant it. She paused at the door, hand on the knob. The rain light caught her face, and I saw a flicker of the little girl she used to be, the one who used to run to me for comfort, not control. Then she turned away, opened the door, and disappeared into the night. The slam echoed through the house, but only for a moment. The quiet that followed stayed, and it did not hurt. Marjorie showed up unannounced the next afternoon, her coat still damp from the rain. She didn't bother with small talk. She closed the door behind her and said quietly, Evie, there's something you need to see. She set her phone on the table and opened a picture a photo of Lydia at the coast, smiling in a sun hat beside a rented convertible. "This was posted last weekend," Marjorie said. "The same weekend she told you she couldn't pay rent." My throat went dry. "That can't be right." "She tagged the hotel," Marjorie said. "5-star resort. They don't rent rooms for under $400 a night." I wanted to argue, but my voice wouldn't move. Instead, I walked to the drawer where I kept my banking files and pulled out the recent statements. Line after line blurred together transfers, digital purchases, things I'd never bought, airline tickets, designer boutiques, payments I didn't remember approving. "She said she needed help with medical bills," I whispered. Marjorie's voice softened. "She's been lying for a long time, Evie. You just didn't want to believe it." I stared at the pages until the numbers stopped meaning anything. All I could think about was the way Lydia's voice had cracked at my door, how practiced that tremor sounded now. I called my lawyer, a patient man named Howard Bell who had helped Walter and me years ago. He answered on the second ring. "Howard, it's Evelyn Hart," I said. "I need to secure all my accounts. Everything, the property deed, too." He listened without interrupting, then said, "All right, Mrs. Hart. I'll have the documents ready by morning. We'll close every shared access and file protective notices." "Thank you," I said quietly. He paused before hanging up. "You're not cutting her off, Mrs. Hart. You're setting her free from your wallet, at least." When the line went silent, I sat at the table for a long time. The papers spread before me like evidence in a case I never wanted to win. The guilt I'd carried for years loosened its grip, slipping away like air leaving a room. I folded the statements into a single envelope and sealed it shut. A full week passed before the phone rang again. The sound startled me. It had been days since anyone called. When I saw Lydia's name glowing on the screen, my hand hovered for a long moment before I finally answered. Her voice came through cracked and uneven. "Mom, please. I'm sorry. I need help." I didn't speak right away. All I could hear was her breathing short, panicked. The kind that comes when someone has run out of excuses. "What kind of help?" "Lydia," I asked. "The rent's overdue. They're saying we have to leave by next week. Caleb's been looking for work, but everything's dried up. I don't know what to do." Her words tumbled over one another. "I made mistakes. Okay. But you don't understand what it's like trying to keep everything together." I sat down slowly. "I understand more than you think," I said. "Then please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Just this once. I swear I'll pay you back." The same phrase she'd used 100 times before. But this time, it sounded different, deflated, almost childlike. "You need help." "Yes," I said quietly, "but not the kind money gives." There was a pause. "The kind that stretches so thin it could tear." "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked. "It means I'll pay for a counselor," I said. "And for someone at the job placement center to help you find steady work. That's what I can offer now." Her breath hitched. "You'd really turn your back on your own daughter." I closed my eyes, letting her words land. "No, dear," I said softly. "I'm turning toward myself." The silence on the line filled with quiet sobs. I listened, not with anger or pity, but with the strange calm that comes when truth has finally settled where it belongs. When she could speak again, her voice was smaller. "I don't know if I can do this without you." "You can," I said. "You just never had to." She didn't reply. A click ended the call. For a moment, I stayed there, phone in my lap, the house utterly still. Then I rose, put the kettle on, and waited for the soft whistle. Outside, the rain that had lasted for days had stopped. The pavement gleamed under a shy slice of late sunlight. I poured my tea and stood at the window, the steam warm against my face. Somewhere deep inside, something finally unclenched. Christmas came softly that year. No grand plans, no phone calls waiting to be returned. Marjorie convinced me to join her family at the community center, where volunteers strung lights and wrapped small gifts for the children in the shelter. I spent most of the morning helping a little girl tie ribbons that kept slipping from her fingers. Her laughter filled the space in me that used to ache. When we finished, Marjorie handed me a mug of cider and studied my face. "You look peaceful," she said. "I finally am," I told her. That evening, when I returned home, a small envelope waited in the mailbox. My name written in Lydia's handwriting, careful, almost shy. Inside was a simple card. "I'm getting help. Thank you for not giving up, even when you stopped giving." I stood there in the doorway, the scent of pine still clinging to my coat, and read it twice before placing it beside Walter's photo on the mantel. His smile looked the same as it always had, patient, proud, like he'd known this day would come. Later, I took a small brass plaque from the counter and carried it to the porch. The screws were cold against my fingers as I fixed it under the light. When I stepped back, the engraved words caught the glow, built by boundaries, kept by respect. For a long while, I just stood there, watching the light spill across the steps. It wasn't bright or showy, just steady, the kind that keeps you company rather than drawing attention. Inside, I poured tea and sat by the window. The Portland rain had started again, fine and silvery, tapping against the glass. Beyond it, the porch light burned quietly, a small proof that something good could last. They used to say family was blood. I had learned it was behavior shown, not claimed, chosen one moment at a time. I took a slow sip, the warmth spreading through me, and let the quiet hold its place. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need permission. Peace had finally come, and it knew my address.